Well, fall is officially here up north. Woke up this morning, it was 48 degrees on the dash of my truck. We've got a huge layer of fog on the river this morning. Water temps are in the upper 60s, and I thought this is a great time to talk about the early fall transition for crappie. Today we're going to be talking about the fall rigs that I'm going to be using for this early stage of the fall. Also the locations you can find them on lakes, rivers, and reservoirs. First, let's run down, let's find some crappie, and then we'll talk about the rod and reel setups that we're going to be using this early part of fall. I'm going to run slowly though, because there's a lot of fog. All right, before we talk about location of where to find all these fish, let's just talk about my three kind of go-to setups that I'm going to be using through most of the early fall transition. This first one is the 7-foot one piece. It's a casting rod by ACC Crappie Sticks. I typically pair it with either a 1,000 or 2,000 size reel. This is the Viper X by PC Fun. 6 pound is usually what I'm going with if I'm casting a bunch, either the mono fluorocarbon or a copolymer line. And then depends on what the fall rate I want to be. Right now the crappie are still a little bit deeper in their late summer patterns because we just got into September up here, but as they push a little bit shallower I might go to a smaller jig head. Right now I'm using a 1/8 ounce. I might go down to a 1/16 ounce jig head if I want a slower fall rate. And I don't know if you can see, there's just shad busting all over real close to the shallows right here. These bait fish are going to move shallow as we get into the fall, and these crappie are just going to chase them up. So having a casting rod, whether you're casting around weed edges or maybe you're casting around docks or any type of laydown you see on the bank, this is just a great setup to catch crappie in the fall. So the second setup that I'm going to be using is typically what I would be using if I was going down south fishing some of those bigger reservoirs, because people plant brush piles, stake beds. It's more common in those places. Up north, there are some lakes that have brush piles, but you got to be real careful. You got to work with the lake association whether you can put them in or not. So if you're fishing down south in a reservoir system, I would use a long rod. Your 10-foot plus long rods. Typically I use the 12 or 13-foot rods by ACC, pair them with a 1,000 size reel. I typically run those with 10-pound braid, because you guys got some big crappie down south. 10-pound braid to like a 6 or 8-pound fluorocarbon leader and about a 6-foot long leader. Double jig setups are a great way to utilize those long rods when you're fishing those shallower brush piles, or if you're even fishing a bridge kind of on the shallow side of those bridges. It's just a great way to present multiple baits in front of a crappie's face, try to figure out kind of what the color pattern and the profile they want to feed on. And the last setup that I like using on the river systems up north is a dock shooting setup. ACC's got a couple different dock shooting rods, but having a 1/16 ounce or even a 1/32 ounce jig head, skipping those under those docks, those crappie are chasing bait fish. Docks hold a ton of bait fish in the fall, so it's a good place to find some crappie. Shoot the jig up under the dock. I catch a lot of them in the fall here on the river systems. Typically the bite gets really good closer to the end of September, beginning of October, but today we're going to go see if we can find some dock fish in the beginning of September on the river. As we get into the fall here, these water temperatures are going to start to drop and bait fish are going to push into the shallows. Crappie are going to follow those bait fish. Typically you can find them in like 5 to 10 feet of water, sometimes even shallower. They're chasing the bait fish around the weed lines, any pieces of cover, whether it's docks, brush piles, stake beds, laydowns along the bank. And so a great place to start on most rivers, I'm on a river today, or a reservoir, is the docks. Dock shooting is great most of the year, but in the fall when those bait fish really start concentrating in the shallows, typically you're going to find these docks on the points or the secondary points closer to the creek channel. You're not going to find big schools of crappie push back into the far backs of these creeks, kind of where you found them during the spawning season. You're going to find them just off the main channel or just off the main creek channel, closest to a secondary point, finding those docks. That's where these bait fish are going to be. Skipping a 1/16 ounce jig is a great way to do this on light line. I typically run about a 6 pound when I'm doing dock shooting. High visibility line is key because you got to be able to watch that line for that crappie strike. If you wanted to slower the fall rate, I'd go to about a 1/32 ounce jig. But this is just a great way to catch crappie on the rivers and reservoir systems, or any place where there's a lot of docks that are near deeper water. They're not necessarily in deep water, but they're near deeper water. Here's a map kind of showing some locations of docks that are close to that creek edge, but they're still in like 5 to 6 feet of water. I've had a lot of good success dock shooting on this river. Specifically in the month of October, it seems like that's when you get big schools of bait fish concentrating on the docks. You get a bunch of predator fish like bass and walleye pushing those fish up there, and then the crappie, they're there for the pickings as well. Me too. Good crappie. Good crappie, buddy. Come here. Yep. All right. That's the crappie we want to end the dock on, so we can go to find some deeper water crappie for you guys. But dock fishing in the fall can be very, very productive on these river systems. So another place to find these crappie are the weed beds on our natural lakes. Now, you might have some on your reservoir system or your river system. Typically, you're going to find these on the natural lakes up north, these massive weed beds. And the crappie are there for two reasons. One, the bait fish are there because the oxygen is there. So they're there for food and oxygen. Typically, if I'm casting around weed edges, I'm running that 7 foot, maybe the 7.5 foot ACC rod. Casting small jigs, maybe some beetle spins are great this time of year. Even some smaller crankbaits can produce a lot of fish. You're just trying to mimic those bait fish that are schooled up tighter to those weed beds. And this tactic is going to work great up until the weeds start to die. So the weeds will probably start to die off towards the middle to the end of October, and then those fish are going to push out deeper again. I know I've done a lot of videos about crappie fishing, that hard to soft bottom transition. That's usually like a middle to later fall progression. This early part of fall, these crappie will go shallower, and on most of our natural lakes, think less than 12 feet of water. Most of our weed lines, they get out to about 8 to 12 feet on their deepest weed edge, and that's where I would start fishing for some of these crappie. Again, just casting a bunch of different search baits, curly tails, anything that mimics those bait fish roaming the weed lines in those shallow areas. So the last place I would look if you're fishing a reservoir or a river system for an early fall or even a mid-fall transition is the bridges. The bridges hold fish pretty much year-round, but they're a great place for fall fishing. This is a place you can actually find crappie both deeper in like 20-25 feet of water and on the shallow side. You might even find crappie right at the surface in like 6 feet of water. It depends where the bait fish are set up. It depends on the wind pattern from the previous days of kind of where they pushed all the bait fish in. Close to different pillars, maybe they're pushed off the bridge because there's brush piles on the downstream side. There's like stumps and trees that got sucked in to current eddies and kind of sunk down there. But this is where I would use a long rod. If you're vertically jigging some of these laydowns or these stump systems that got sunk behind these pillars, or if you're just vertically jigging the pillars themselves, it's a great way to catch these fish. It's a great way to present the bait right in front of the crappie's face without kind of casting and kind of swinging it by the bait. If it's the first cold front of the fall, these crappie can be a little bit lethargic sometimes. So presenting a bait purely vertically is a great way to trigger some bites, and a long rod, a 10, 12, 13 foot long rod is a great way to do that. As we get into the middle part of the fall on the rivers and reservoir systems, these bridges become pretty key because the crappie are going to start living on the edges of the creek channel. If you can find any type of vertical timber, brush piles, anything like that on the edge of that vertical timber, it's a good chance there's going to be some crappie on it because those bait fish are also going to push out to kind of roam the deeper water as we get into the middle part of the fall and definitely into the winter patterns. Well, that's going to wrap it up for the day. Use these tactics for the early fall transition, catch some crappie. Docks are a great time of year, the shallower brush piles, and then bridges hold fish year round. I got some fish for the frying pan tonight. Hopefully you catch a ton of fish for your frying pan with these tactics. If you got any comments or questions, post them in the comment section below, or you can message me on either Facebook or Instagram. Always appreciate hearing from you. Good luck on the water this fall. Hopefully you catch a ton of fish.